Hey y'all, and welcome back to Irregulators. I'm Josh Kasoff. Last month we talked about Nevada's marijuana agent card program and how it doesn't exactly deserve the title of gold standard compared to Colorado's much more progressive program. However, if we look at the other legal states' agent card program equivalents, or lack thereof, you'll see Nevada doesn't even deserve the title of bronze standard. Let's first talk about our friends in the Beaver State. The Oregon cannabis industry is controlled by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. They're the regulators, and they've assigned 4 different agent cards: wholesalers, processors, producers, and retailers. And we have little nice pictures to show for it. And while each agent card type costs $100 in total, and some roles may require more than one marijuana worker's permit, you'll notice one very big difference. Looking at the second page of the application, you'll see that each marijuana worker permit is good for 5 years, quintuple the amount of any agent card in Nevada. Along with that, most testing lab employees aren't even required to get a worker's permit. Even their excluded felony offenses are far more progressive than Nevada. Depending on the offense, the time of exclusion ranges from 2 to 5 years, still nowhere close to Nevada's 10 years. $100 for 5 years, and each worker's permit has a longer lifespan than the exclusionary period for most excluded felony offenses? Sign me up! In the Evergreen State, for example, there's not even an agent card equivalent. Their regulators, the Washington Liquor and Cannabis Board, take a far more different approach when it comes to their regulation of recreational cannabis. Ian Eisenberg, owner of Seattle's Uncle Ike Dispensaries, describes a very different regulator in the LCB. As a cannabis retailer in Washington, he says the Washington LCB regulates dispensaries in a way more hands-off manner than the Department of Taxation.
From a retailer's perspective, the LCB's focus is mainly enforcement of laws that the consumers see, the customer sees. So age enforcement, safety, the size of our signs, nitpicky things like that.
As for how the Washington LCB has been as a regulator from a business perspective standpoint, Eisenberg once again offers a very different response than I would expect from most Nevada cannabis employees.
No government agency is easy to work with.
Amen to that, my friend. And although the LCB tried to regulate all the industries they control all at the same time, Eisenberg says they've taken a much more divide and conquer model, a model that Eisenberg says is actually working.
Over the past couple of years, the LCB they divided it up where liquor is liquor and cannabis is cannabis. So now the cannabis enforcement officers really know what they're doing, and they're great. We have no problem at all.
As for agent card equivalents, Eisenberg says nothing of the sort even exists at all in the Washington cannabis industry.
If you're a medical bud tender, there's an online course, or you go into a class for a couple of days. It's really easy. But for everybody else, for adult use, there's no licensing. There was a few bills that people have tried to pass that would require a licensing, similar to alcohol server permits. But the big difference is alcohol servers, I've taken that class, it's mainly about over-serving a customer in a bar. And because there's no public consumption of cannabis, it doesn't really make sense.
As for excluded felony offenses, it's once again completely different in Washington than it is here in Nevada.
In terms of background checks, that's up to the individual pot store. Like, we do background checks on all employees, but if you have, there's no law saying if you have a felony, you can't work in a pot shop.
Isn't it great to be a Nevadan? Any American cannabis consumer would probably think a state as deeply red as Oklahoma would be one of the last states to pass any medical cannabis laws, and yet you'd be wrong. In June of 2018, Oklahoma passed State Question 788 by a margin of 57%. In fact, their regulator, the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, has put no cap at all on cannabis cultivation licenses. The state that will always be inferior to Texas currently leads the country in the number of dispensaries, with a Marijuana Business Daily article from last week estimating a total of 10,000 licenses in the state. Joe and Jennifer Westnedge own and operate Jeni, a family-owned cultivation near Tulsa. And they say that after the $2,500 application fee, the license process was far more fair.
As far as Jeni goes, the regulations are the same for everybody. So it wasn't they could pick and choose who they do and don't give them to. It's clear cut who can get license.
As long as you can afford that $2,500 fee, and you don't have any drug trafficking or distribution charges in the last 5 years, you can get that cultivation license most likely. And because the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority doesn't look as much into your finances as the Department of Taxation does, you don't have to be a millionaire to own a cultivation in Oklahoma. But when it comes to an agent card equivalent, that also doesn't exist in Oklahoma. However, Joe and Jennifer have an interesting way to properly vet their employees and to also make sure they're knowledgeable.
Ask that our employees have a medical card, to be honest with you, because they have to go through that check to get a medical patient card. So you can't be actively on probation or parole. You have to be 5 years from conviction. It's the same.
The cannabis employees aren't required to spend hundreds of dollars a year just to keep their jobs, and the employers get to do a background check as well and make sure their employees are knowledgeable about cannabis. Sounds like a way better program than Nevada has. To conclude, the Department of Taxation's regulation on agent cards are even worse when compared to other states. Oregon's cards last 5 times what the Nevada cards do, and Oklahoma and Washington don't even have an agent card equivalent. The regulators themselves get out of the background check process, while the employers themselves get to do the great work and take power away from the regulators. And that all sounds like a much better plan than we have here in the Silver State. For June's installment of Nevada NORML News, I'm Josh Kasoff with Irregulators. Y'all have a great night. Stay classy, Las Vegas.